Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. Welcome to the workshop on Sustainable Development Goals and the Role of Parliaments. I would like to invite Honorable President Mohammad Nasheed, Speaker of the People's Majlis, to make his inaugural remarks. Honorable Speaker, President Mohammad Nasheed.
I'm just trying to time it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellency Amida Salashi Alice Jahabana and the United Nations Under-Secretary General, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Maldives and especially to the People's Majlis, our Parliament. Our Parliament is a very old institution in this country. We started our first Majlis Parliament in 1932, and therefore we are a little older than most parliaments in South Asia. I thank the Inter-Parliamentary Union for organizing this event with the United Nations and the People's Majlis. Good evening, good morning, ministers, members of parliament, diplomats, Majlis staff, and everyone present here. The essence of the discussion today is the role of parliament on delivering the SGDs, Social Development Goals. There is always only two goals for the parliament. You may be delivering anything, but we have to specifically do two most important things. One is to legislate. Second is to make the government accountable. In developing or in structuring a role for the parliament so that we may be able to assist in the development of social development goals as set by the UN. These are 17 specific goals, and each goal has a target, and countries are supposed to try and reach these goals. We are glad that we have achieved most of the goals, but of course there is a lot of work to do. Just to the MPs, goal number 1 is no poverty. I think that's defined as about $1.20. Our per capita now stands around about $8,500, and that would translate to a much higher figure than $1.40. But then again, the distribution of that $8,500, that is our goal, to make it more equitable so that we come up with legislation and we scrutinize the government so that this distribution is more equitable. I think if we try to find a structural manner in which how the development goals can be mentioned or can be sought out by the parliament, my suggestion is that political parties have development goals as part of their campaign manifestos. It's very difficult for governments to start something new once they are in government. They come into government promising the people that they will deliver certain specific goals. So it is important that if we want to register these specific development goals, then they must figure in our manifestos. We go to the people selling a plan, a development goal. We are also doing exactly the same thing. Our manifesto is nothing other than a development goal. How we fashion it, how we think about it, how we narrate it might be different, but we are all seeking a better life for our people. We want prosperity. We want a better house. We want education for our children. We want a job. We want to have good food, and we want to be happy. And these are the development goals. After winning an election, we then go about legislating our manifesto. That is the legislative agenda for any government or any political party in power. We have, for instance, now this government has a legislative agenda that went as long as, I think, about 40 legislations. And we are in the process of delivering them. The strategic action plan, formulated again based on the manifesto, is the launching pad for the legislations. The strategic action plans will give you cross-cutting areas, different ministries and departments, and that would specifically give you a procurement order, a tender notice. That's where finally things are delivered, through a procurement order. My suggestion, therefore, Your Excellency, is that you speak to political parties, not governments. They are locked the minute they are elected. They are elected to deliver a specific set of programs. They don't like to change their program because they want to win again. And the transparency of it all is again delivered through political parties and through competitive politics, through democracy. Transparency is so important to see that these goals are delivered through the parliamentary process, through the legislative process, through the government process. I cannot leave without mentioning so many challenges that we still have in trying to deliver these goals. Most importantly, debt. And coupled with the ever-rising high adaptation cost. Climate adaptation costs us more than 30% of our revenue. We have to build embankments. We have to build water breakers. We have to build fresh water systems because our water table is contaminated. We have to now protect against floods, drought. Everything has changed. The swells are higher, the wind is stronger, the sun is more, the rain is more. Climate has changed, and we are facing the brunt of it. Every season, it's worse than the last season. And we spend 30%, madam, of our income on adaptation. Not because we've done any of this. We did not emit the carbon, but we are now having to pay the cost. And on top of this, Excellency, we spend more than 25% of our income on debt repayment. Most of the assets built by the debt are not productive because bad weather has washed it away. We took a loan to build a house, to build a road, to build a bridge. But the weather last year has washed it away, and we are left with only the debt. It is impossible now for us to serve this because the assets are stranded. It's very simple economics. We will be in distress. More than 20 climate vulnerable countries will go into default in the next 2 years because we owe more than $2 trillion in debt repayment in the next 2 years. And because we have lost more than $2 trillion in lost GDP growth because of bad weather. Bad weather, climate change, is going to be the biggest challenge in delivering these SDGs. On hunger and on science, on adaptation, we need more science. We need a crop that is more resilient to our soil, ever-changing climate. And we are growing with so much fertilizers and pesticides, our islands almost glow at night. And so we need to have more organic as well as a more resilient crop. And we need the science for that. Even if we all go to bed today, the climate will still change. We have pumped enough poisonous gases into the atmosphere to make sure that it will change. We need a coral that is more resilient. So we need the science for it. It's shockingly amazing that we do not have a genome sequence, DNA, for the polyp. And this is 2022. Last year, when I kept on saying this in every single fora, a US university, I think, has started some work on this. We need a resilient coral. We need a resilient species. And we need to use nature for our adaptation. We need to use nature as infrastructure. We can't endlessly be destroying our natural habitat in the name of development for a harbor, for a breakwater, for a house, or for a bridge. We must find development methods, development goals that is far more in line with what nature is trying to throw at us. And we need the science for that. Again, thank you ever so much for the UN. You, Deputy Secretary General, for coming to the Maldives. Today is a little bit hotter, but we had rain the last 2 days. And we will probably be having rain in the next few days as well. But I am sure you will be able to enjoy your stay in the Maldives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Now I would like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Armida Salcia Alishabana, UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAPE, to make her remarks. Her Excellency Ms. Armida Salcia Alishabana.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable President Muhammad Nasheed, Speaker of the People's Majlis of Maldives, Honorable Members of the People's Majlis of Maldives, Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It gives me immense pleasure to speak before this August gathering at the People's Majlis of Maldives today to reflect on the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, and the role of Parliament in SDG implementation I wish to express my most sincere appreciation to the Honorable Speaker, members of the People's Majlis and the Government of Maldives for organizing this event with us, SCAP, in collaboration with the Ministry of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, the IPU, Interparliamentary Union, as well as the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Adopted in 2015 by 193 member states of the UN. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its SDGs were historical in their ambition and universality, applicable to all nations around the world, leaving no one behind. The member states are committed to eradicating poverty and hunger, achieving gender equality, and mitigating global warming and its impact by 2030. So it's 8 years away, yes? So we are now in 2022, so 8 years remains. The 17 SDGs encompass 5 broad dimensions of people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnership, or 5P, and reflect the complexities and interlinkages of global issues such as climate change, digitalization, food security, as well as financing. In the same year, we saw another groundbreaking international treaty adopted, that was also in 2015, which was the Paris Agreement on Climate Action. Since then, we have endured and are still enduring crisis after crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war have triggered devastating ripple effects at an unprecedented scale all over the world. Climate-induced disaster and sea level rise have unleashed havoc in so many countries, particularly hitting communities, economies, and government coffers of small island and developing countries unjustly and disproportionately in comparison to their carbon emission. I think this is also the point that Honorable Speaker alluded earlier. Whereas the need for concerted action and mutual support in our world has become ever more relevant and urgent. We are witnessing deepening divides and widening inequalities worldwide. The SGDs remain as relevant as ever, especially as challenges become greater and more complex than before. The 2022 SCAP SDG Progress Report, this is an annual report that SCAP launched every year in March. And the last one in 2022 shows that the region as a whole, Asia Pacific, is not on track to achieve any of the SDGs by 2030, unfortunately. Progress towards SDGs in the region has slowed as COVID-19 pandemic, climate change have exacerbated further the development challenges. Average progress in Asia Pacific disproportionately excludes some groups with distinct demographic or socio-economic characteristics. Those furthest behind, including women, rural population, and poorer households, generally face more vulnerabilities. For many vulnerable populations, food security, education, and livelihoods have deteriorated during the pandemic even further. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda recognizes the cardinal role of parliamentarians in ensuring political support and translating SDGs into national legislation and holding governments accountable for SDG implementation. Parliaments and political parties also have their own part to play in building and sustaining strong and inclusive democratic institutions and achieving gender equality and parity in women's political representation. As democratically elected representatives, your ears are instrumental in listening to the voices of citizens, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable. Your voices are important in making laws relevant to them and ensuring governments make policies and deliver programs and services effectively, leaving no one behind. I'm very pleased to note that Maldives is embarking on the second VNR. This is the Voluntary National Review of the SDGs, and will present the results at the UN High-Level Political Forum 2023 in New York in July. VNR processes provide countries with a better understanding of their SDG progress and the issues that must be addressed. The engagement and contribution parliaments in the VNR process are very, very crucial and important. ESCAP will provide technical support through the Ministry of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure that will lead the VNR process in the Maldives. I hope the People's Majlis will actively engage in the consultation. Finally, I wish to highlight that Maldives has been among the most active and vocal advocates for SDGs on the regional as well as the global stage, while understanding that as a small island developing state, the impact of climate change is detrimental and existential to the people of the Maldives. The leadership and devotion of the Honorable Speaker, Mr. Nasheed, in climate action advocacy worldwide has been inspirational. I hope this session will stimulate reflection and action on the part of the People's Majlis to help accelerate SDG implementation in Maldives. I would like to reiterate again our commitment to fostering regional cooperation and supporting the Maldives in achieving sustainable development goals. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Excellency. May I now invite Honorable Ms. Aishat Mohammed Didi, Minister of Gender, Family and Social Services, to deliver her remarks. Honorable Ms. Aishat Mohammed Didi.
Honorable Speaker of Parliament, President Mohammad Nasheed, Executive Secretary of United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, Her Excellency Ms. Amida Salsia Ali Shabana, UN Resident Coordinator in the Maldives, Her Excellency Ms. Catherine Haswell, members of the Parliament and distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Maldives, Your Excellency. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, President Mohammad Nasheed, for the opportunity extended to me to address at this auspicious Majlis on the Sustainable Development Goals for the Maldives. The SDGs, or Agenda 2030, is a groundbreaking global commitment to set the world on a sustainable path for inclusive development. As mentioned, a set of 17 SDGs and 169 actionable targets lies at the core of this ambitious agenda. The SDGs are intended to focus and coordinate national policies towards a common vision for humanity. The SDGs build on past efforts to implement the poverty reduction agenda known as the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. They include the 3 pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental agendas. Determination and commitment paved the way for Maldives to become the first MDG plus country in South Asia. We intend to show the same commitment and determination in implementing the SDGs and achieving those goals. The 2030 Agenda is the outcome of extended consultations, as we have heard, and negotiations over several years, which was endorsed in September 2015. The Interparliamentary Union, UNDP, national parliaments, and hundreds of parliamentarians played a very active role throughout the process and advocated strongly for the inclusion of goals related to democratic governance. Realization of the SDGs will involve governments as well as Parliament, the United Nations systems and other international institutions, local authorities, the civil society, business and the private sector, the scientific and the academic community, all of us, all the people. The obligation of the Parliament is to hold the government accountable, as our Honorable Speaker has said, for the goals the government has committed to. The SDGs are a robust framework around which parliaments can base their strategic plans and pursue their own oversight and accountability work. Today I would like to call upon the respected Parliament members to enable laws to create legal framework to facilitate the SDGs. The national budget allocations be geared towards achieving the targets of the SDGs and achieving solutions to our development challenges, focusing on outcomes rather than mere ad hoc activities out of sync. It is also urged that parliamentarians represent their constituents to promote citizen participation in setting policies and priorities for implementation of the SDGs. Out of the 17 goals Maldives has, we have achieved 2 goals so far, with significant challenges in achieving the remaining goals. 3 of the goals need a major effort to attain them by 2030. Much still needs to be done in the areas of gender equality, climate action, and environment sustainability. And access to timely data is needed to make effective policy decisions. To highlight a few specific goals in terms of achievement and the work that needs to be done, we have achieved Goal 1, ending poverty, using the benchmark for extreme poverty of an income of US $1.25 per day, with as low as 6.6% of the population living below this line and 8.2% living below the national poverty line with an income of 74 Maldivian rupiah per day. Through the National Social Protection Agency, we have established various social protection programs which support the most vulnerable in the community. To achieve Goal 2, ending hunger and achieving food security, a significant amount of work needs to be done. Even though there is an overall improvement in nutritious status in terms of child malnutrition and stunting being reduced over the years. The Agriculture Orientation Index for government expenditure is at 0.17%, which reflects that agriculture receives a low share of government spending relative to its contribution to the economic value added in terms of the GDP. However, we have intensified support to farmers through Agro-National Cooperation, AgroNet, by strengthening the supply chain and increase the capacity of contact farming. Goal 3 of healthy lives and promoting well-being for all ages is in line with improved maternal and child mortality indicators and control of communicable diseases, even though there is a rise in non-communicable diseases, which is now a significant challenge. COVID did affect all of this. The government is taking steps to identify its causes and introduce intervention measures. Literacy rates, student enrollment, basic facilities in schools for water and sanitation, it's always for a long time on track. And we have achieved Goal 4 on equitable quality education. SDG 5 concerns gender equality and promotes achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. One of the targets under this goal is to ensure full and effective participation in leadership and governance, leadership and decision-making at all levels in political, economic, and public life. The low representation of women in our parliament hinders achieving this goal. The first goal under the Gender Equality Action Plan of the Maldives, which is an action plan approved this year for the next 5 years, focuses on equal participation and a more equitable representation of women and men in leadership positions and governance. Under this goal, there are strategies and actions to increase the percentage of women's participation in the electoral process and representation in political institutions, especially in the parliament. If we are able to achieve this, SDG 5 will improve. We will have a better score in the Global Gender Index and also accelerate the implementation of CEDAW commitments and minimize the gender gap in leadership and governance. Today, I urge the respective Parliament members to join us in advocating, raising awareness, and implementing affirmative actions to increase women's representation in the Parliament. To achieve Goal 6 on ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, there is a disparity between Male City and the outer islands with safe drinking water and sanitation processes, particularly with some islands in building the water and sewerage systems. A lot of work is done by this government, and we hope by the end of 2023, this index will also change. We need to take urgent action to combat climate change to realize Goal 7 on sustainable clean energy and Goals 13 on climate action, Goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. The esteemed speaker has spoken quite a bit on this. I will not elaborate further on that. SDGs are an opportunity for parliamentarians to demonstrate their commitment to improving people's lives and the health of the general Maldives. Focus and emphasis must be placed on achieving the Agenda 2030. Participation and partnership from the Parliament to governments are crucial to achieve the SDGs. Maldives is committed to achieve the Agenda 2030. We are working to strengthen our data systems and integrate policies to achieve the targets stated in the SDGs. We need the support of all our stakeholders and development partners to overcome the challenges we are facing to achieve the targets of sustainable goals. Let me take the opportunity to thank UNESCAP, UNDP for the continued support, and other UN family members for the continued support to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now I would like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Catherine Haswell, UN Resident Coordinator in Maldives, to say a few words. Her Excellency Ms. Catherine Haswell.
Thank you very much. Honourable President Mohammed Nasheed, Speaker of the People's Majlis of Maldives, Honourable Members of the People's Majlis, Excellency Ms. Aisha Mohammed Didi, Minister of Gender, Family and Social Services, Excellency Fayez Ismail, Minister of Economic Development, Mr. Ahmed Latif, Foreign Secretary, Excellency Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union, Excellency Amida Salthia Al-Jabana, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I'm very happy to say, I'm not so happy to say that's the first time that I've addressed the Majlis. However, I am very happy to say that I do it now at a time where I count many of you as friends. So I'm very pleased to be with you here today and to join you to discuss the pivotal role of the People's Majlis in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. As our previous speakers have already outlined, the 193 member states acknowledged the shared realities and took the bold step in 2015 to collectively work together to tackle issues of our world. The Sustainable Development Goals and the broader Agenda 2030 adopted in 2015 encapsulate greater ambitions than their predecessors, the Millennium Development Goals, because they address the root causes of poverty and inequality and the universal need for a development framework that works for all 193 member states. The SDGs represent the vision of the countries, including the Maldives, and that of the 10 million people who participated in the global consultations to develop the goals. The SDGs are not the UN's SDGs. The SDGs are owned by all member states. I think I worked out with Minister Amir a few weeks ago in focusing our minds around the 8 years until the 2030 agenda is finished and for us to achieve the goals, it's actually around 6 budget cycles, 6 or 7 budget cycles left. So to focus your mind, there's not much time left. And in order for us to make significant progress in the Maldives, we really need to ensure that we integrate and have a plan for achieving the SDGs in the national budgets. And there are some important considerations for us for a positive pathway towards the goals. First, achieving the goals will require strong national ownership intertwined with a whole of government approach. The SDGs are a set of interconnected goals which require inclusive multi-sector coordination. We can make progress in one goal, but it can actually offset and affect implementation of another goal. So they need to be closely looked at with a key strategy which is nationalized and contextualized to Maldives' local situation. In order to achieve that, it's not just government or the UN that's responsible for this. It will involve partnerships with civil society, innovators, media, parliament, and of course the private sector. And that's why we're here today, to work together with Parliament to ensure that the SDGs are an integral part of the decision-making for the Majlis. And as Speaker Nasheed has said, the role of the Majlis is about accountability and legislation. Secondly, prioritising the goals is crucial. We need to ensure that these national strategies are linked and aligned to the goals, so that in achieving the national priorities, the global commitments are met. Together, we need to incorporate the goals into national and local level planning. We're doing that very much with the local government authority, working with the local council as part of the decentralisation agenda of the government. We also need to ensure budgeting for the SDGs. It's through localised solutions that we can achieve the global goals. A key piece of legislation that is in progress and should be on its way to you soon will be the National Planning Act. And this is something we've worked closely with the Ministry of Planning on. And in order to achieve the SDGs, we know globally from experience that the countries that make progress are the ones that have a medium to long-term national development plan. Thirdly, establishing an effective monitoring and reporting mechanism is essential. A key role of Parliament is monitoring and implementing the SDGs to verify that it's appropriate for national and local contexts. Moreover, parliamentarians are in the best position to represent your communities and promote citizen participation for implementing the SDGs. Finally, funding for the SDGs. We need to explore old and new mechanisms for SDG financing. It could include domestic, international, and even government co-financing through private partnerships. So we're currently working on the Integrated National Financing Framework, the INFF, that I'm co-chairing with the Minister of Finance, Minister Amir, and it's designed to set up a financing architecture within the government to ensure that funding priorities are directed towards delivery of the SDGs. Today there's an opportune moment, I think, to discuss ways of strengthening the role of the Parliament in mainstreaming the SDGs into national development, and to put forward practical strategies and plans and think of concrete ways of putting them into action so that we can deliver results that matter to the people. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the UN has signed together with the government of the Maldives the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for 2022 to 2026. At the heart of this is the need and focus on investing in human capital. We know in the Maldives that we've invested a lot in infrastructure, but in order to make progress and achieve the SDGs, we will need to invest more in exactly the things the Minister of Gender has spoken about. We need to work on increasing the level, the quality of education, health services, a whole range of things that are not as always a top priority because they take a long time to achieve. So if we're going to make significant impact on the quality of our labour force, for example, the kind of jobs that are available, and the match of the quality of the education that people have in order to meet the need of the labour market, this is going to be a generation as a result. So these are the types of things that we're focusing on the UN system, trying to move away from infrastructure. As a middle-income country, the focus really now needs to be an accelerated investment in human capital. We hope the session today will help to renew the commitment of Parliament as well to engage in efforts towards achievement of SDGs for the country. And I'm certain that the crucial role of Parliament in monitoring the SDGs will contribute to accelerating sustainable, inclusive and equitable development. One SDG that wasn't mentioned by other speakers, and I just wanted to raise it because it's one of my favourites. We're not allowed to have favourites. They're like your children, as the Deputy Secretary-General says. You must love all 17 equally. But one of my favourites, because I think it's the most relevant for the Maldives, is SDG 16. And this is justice and strong institutions and peace. And I think we have a lot of work that we're doing with the current administration and plans for the long term in terms of the justice sector. And that's one that I would call on all of you as members of Parliament to ensure and enforce for future-proofing and strong institutions for the Maldives. So, shukriya, thank you so much. It's great to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. A pre-recorded speech by His Excellency Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of Inter-Parliamentary Union, will be presented in this inaugural ceremony now.
The Right Honorable Mohammed Nasheed, Speaker of the People's Majlis of Maldives, Honorable Eva Abdullah, Deputy Speaker of the People's Majlis of Maldives, Madam Amida Salsia Ali Shabana, Executive Secretary of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, Madam Catherine Haswell, UN Resident Coordinator for the Maldives, Honorable Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I address you today at this important SDG event. I would have wished to be there with you in person, but unfortunately I am traveling at the time of the event. Let me start by warmly thanking the People's Majlis of Maldives, in particular the Right Honorable Speaker and Deputy Speaker of Parliament, for the leadership and commitment to the SDGs agenda. I recall with great pleasure when in 2019, we jointly organized the 4th South Asian Speakers Summit on achieving the SDGs. I would also like to thank my colleague, the Executive Secretary of ESCAP and her office, for the fruitful collaboration built on the SDGs front. Since 2020, we have organized joint online events on the SDGs for Asia-Pacific region parliaments. The IPU is delighted to see that this collaboration is strengthening also at the national level. Honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, this is a period of extraordinary challenges in which the global population is facing multiple crises that have severely hit the health, socio-economic, and environmental sectors. Now more than ever, there is a need to strengthen actions and ensure that the SDGs are the guidelines to address current and structural challenges at the root. Governments bear the largest responsibility, but the effective implementation of the SDGs requires the contribution of all. Constructive communication, cooperation, and coordination, especially among key institutions such as governments and parliaments, is fundamental. Honorable members of Parliament, never in history has it been more pressing to use your political power to address the global crises that are hindering progress towards the SDGs. As legislators, you should help create an enabling environment for the achievement of the SDGs, monitor policy implementation, and ensure that the needs and concerns of the whole of society are given due consideration with no one left behind. As overseers of government action, you should increase the opportunities to systematically consult with citizens and keep track of commitments made by the government, also through international monitoring processes like the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. Next year, the Maldives government will present its progress report on the implementation of the SDGs to the HLPF. This will be an excellent opportunity to review progress and setbacks towards the SDG targets, provide input and convey citizens' concerns. According to UN guidelines, the VNR process should be inclusive of all stakeholders. As a state institution whose oversight role is critical to accountability, Parliament needs to be engaged in this process from the start to carefully monitor the implementation of the SDGs. Parliamentary oversight of budget expenditure is also crucial to ensure the effectiveness of government expenditure on SDG implementation. As citizens' representatives, you should advocate for a coherent integration of the SDGs into budgets and ensure they address the needs of all segments of society, especially those that are in marginalized and vulnerable situations. Honorable members of Parliament, I encourage you to seize this opportunity to discuss existing challenges and identify tangible solutions to ensure that the well-being of people and planet is at the center of national plans. The IPU is committed to supporting Parliament in enhancing its capacities to deliver on the SDGs through its core functions. We stand ready to provide such support, also in collaboration with ESCAP, if the People's Majlis so wishes. I wish you interesting and fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we conclude the opening ceremony of the workshop. We will be back after a short break of 10 minutes to start the session.